Today's best music and your favourite songs of all time. You are listening to Dave Sweetmore, and I'm delighted to say now that I am joined by one of the most respected guitar technicians in the country, a gentleman I had the pleasure of interviewing a few years ago on a different media output, and he's here with me today to talk about his brand new book. Steve Clarke. Steve, how you doing, man?
Above average for the time of year.
Hey, it's good to see you. It's really good to see you.
Yeah, and you.
So, you've got a new book coming out, which we're going to talk about in a minute, Famous Frets Photos Volume 1. But for those listening who perhaps aren't familiar with you and your job, tell us a little bit about your history and your line of work.
Well, my history goes back quite a bit, but I've always been playing guitar since I was before a teenager. And I started to get involved with local bands, going out with them, 15, 16 years old, lugging the gear about. Eventually got the bug, joined a local band when I was 19, went professional pretty quick, really, doing all the gigs locally, Liverpool, etc. And it progressed through those years until I eventually got into a band that I was quite proud of called The Drones. And that was a great time, you know, did some fantastic gigs, met a lot of nice people. Then I was in a band called Taxi. We had 4 albums out in Germany. We had 8 singles out. It was an amazing time. Pop rock band, completely different than The Drones, you know, quite a shock. But it was good fun. And again, we were good mates, and the band was good fun to be with. But that was like both of them. I enjoyed both of them, really. But I've always fixed my own guitars, Dave. Throughout all of this, I've always fixed my own guitars. I went into production work in the late 80s and 90s, working with local bands, worked with the Smiths, you know, Buzzcocks, people like that. And I used to be puzzled as to why the guitar wouldn't stay in tune. So I'd say, Pete, give us your guitar. Let's have a look at that. Oh, when did you put your strings on this? When did you have it set up? What's that? When did you have a new nut on it? I don't know what you're talking about. So I'd fix them. One thing led to another, and my name kind of got around a little bit locally. Oh, Steve Clarke, yeah, I've got your number off such a body. Will you have a look at my guitar? And I used to think, what's this about? And that's while I was doing other stuff, doing production work. And it's gone on through the years, and eventually joined a London band, and my name got around down there, which was great because it paid for my train fare. So a little kind of notice thing went on the board. It just says Steve Clarke Guitar Repairs, and it was a rehearsal room as well as a studio complex, so people would knock on the door and say, oh, the pickup isn't working, can you have a look at it? Great, got paid, smashing, cover my fare. And I think one day I was going down there, and I was going down New Bond Street, and I went past, I think it would have been Sotheby's at the time. No, it might have been Bonham's. And I walked in there because they had a Mark Bolan sale going on, a Flying V. And I looked at the poster outside. I thought, I was a big Mark Bolan fan, and I just looked at it and I thought, that doesn't look right. Just doesn't look right, because I was a big fan. So I went in, kind of cheeky, and I said, who's involved with the sale? And they told me, and I said, that Flying V isn't the one Bolan used. I said, it's similar, but it's not the one that you're saying is the one that he used. And your date's wrong, you didn't play Get It On that. And they're going, oh, wait a minute, let's go and get somebody. And they said to me, prove it, go home, prove that it was the case, you know, that he didn't use that guitar. They certainly didn't buy it at the time, they said. And they started phoning me up saying, would you like to have a look at this guitar we've got coming in? It's, you know, David Bowie's or, you know, Eric Clapton's or whatever. And it started from there. And they've been phoning me up since. I've had some great guitars.
I'd imagine that back then, now, I dare say the internet's played a big part in what you do and helped out a fair bit. But back then, correct me if I'm wrong, that probably was before the internet.
Absolutely.
So how did you do all the research then?
I already had, I was a magazine nut. I'd buy every guitar magazine that you could find. So I was always in Waterstones and places like that, and I'd buy every book I could see. And over years, you cross-reference these, and a new book comes out with new information and something else is found out. And I accumulated all this kind of information. Of course, when the internet started to kick in, I'm cross-referencing and making sure, is that true? And it changes all the time, even today. So I did have kind of a knowledge about, you know, when things were made and stuff like that. But my advantage is that I fix guitars. So I can see an old guitar. If somebody says, oh, it's a 1959 Les Paul, I'll go, oh, let's have a look. Because there are a lot of fakes. I've just had one recently, and they're a lot of money if you find an original 59 Les Paul.
So you were doing this, you were finding out all this information, learning so much along the way as well, and doing a lot of work for the likes of Bonham's and stuff. Yeah. You've ended up with some of the most important, iconic pieces of work and guitars in your hand. Ever tell us about some of the ones that really stand out that, you know, you can go, yeah, I worked on that guitar, I valued that guitar?
I've been very lucky. I mean, I've had George Harrison's guitars, I've had 3, maybe 4 of his guitars. Just this year, I've had Peter Green collection, which has just been awesome. That was over 150 of his guitars, private collection, and amplifiers. Jeff Beck's guitar came up last year, astonishing. The yellow Strat, for people who know Jeff Beck. It's just been mad. Eric Clapton, looked at Eric Clapton stuff, Pete Townsend, Paul Kossoff, Hank Marvin fans out there, the first Strat that came in the UK.
It is pretty much all the iconic guitarists of all time. Your knowledge and your expertise, would you say it's quite a unique and rare thing? Because it does seem that they all come to you. Is it quite an unusual thing for people to have perhaps the knowledge you've got, a rare thing perhaps?
I'd say so, Dave. It's interesting because I've often thought, why haven't they asked such and such about it? I even thought that earlier this year I went to New York. I had to look at Eric Clapton's acoustic guitar. It's the one that he'd composed You're Wonderful Tonight on. And I'm thinking, why don't I get somebody in New York to look at this, to authenticate it and fix it? Only a minor repair thing. But it's down to this trust thing. They don't really like stories getting out. You have to sign NDAs and things like that. I can't tell anybody, literally. And when friends say, what are you doing today, Steve? Oh, what was you doing last week? And I'm thinking, I can't say. So it's a trust thing, and it's nice to feel as though they trust you that much, with stuff. But yeah, it's. I often think, why haven't they asked somebody else? And I don't know why that is. I just assume other people would be able to do it. But maybe my advantage is that I can repair them, and I have a different eye for it. So I can look at vintage stuff and say, that's been changed, that's not correct, that's a fake, so on and so on. Whereas perhaps somebody else that would just fix them would not know too much about the history, I'm supposing.
There's obviously a lot of respect there from the biggest names in the industry, the likes of Bonhams, and of course all the musicians as well. You spoke about you went from playing in bands to repairing guitars and having all this knowledge and expertise about them as well. What about playing? Have you continued playing in bands, or has this sort of took over?
It's taken over, pretty much taken over. It has done for some years. I'm playing guitar pretty much every day. I have to do when I'm fixing stuff. And of course when I see iconic guitars, you do have to play them. And that's cool. You pick up a guitar that you think, this was the Pete Townsend guitar used on Tommy, or like I say, Jeff Beck's guitar. You think, I can't believe this, and you see the YouTube clips of these people playing it. It's fantastic.
We were talking before off air about the fact you'd had Francis Ross's guitar, the one that he had for so many years, opened Live Aid with. I don't want to ask you what your favourite guitar you've ever had your hands on is, because there's too many. It'd be a stupid question to ask. Is there any guitar or any musician's guitar that you've never had your hands on that you'd like to?
Jimmy Page. It
sounds like he's the only one you've not had, really.
He probably is the only one, and I've been very close to it. Very close to it. It's very hard to get to some of these people. It's not all Bonham stuff I get the guitar work from. Sometimes I'll make the inquiries myself, go through the management, record company and whatever, and that can lead you there. But with Jimmy Page, he's very, very reclusive. You may know this, but very hard to get to. He doesn't really have a contact, of anybody. The closest I got was through a friend of a friend, if you like. Somebody in the Bonham system may have known about him. And I went that route, and it was very close, but COVID put a stop to it.
Stopped a lot of things, COVID, didn't it?
And I might pick up on it again.
You've had an amazing career, one that I feel like we could talk about for hours and hours and hours. We've got you in today because you've just released a brand new book called Famous Frets Photos Volume 1. Why have you decided now is the right time to release this book?
Well, with the first book, which was just called Famous Frets, that went into great detail about all the guitars, like Dave Hill from Slade, Andy Scott from Sweet, the glam rock guys, and plenty of others, and Paul Kossoff. But it was largely very, very detailed, and it had a big backstory as to how I come to get a look at these guitars. My publisher said to me, last year it would be, he said, Steve, let's do another book, maybe 2. But he said, cut down on all the text, go more photos and things like that. So I went that way. So I've put more pictures in this edition. Still got the spec for the people that want all that detail. So there's kind of a sidebar with some of the information that you want to know, but I've cut out a lot of the story and just gone straight to these pictures, like with Peter Green, some cool pictures of Peter Green's guitars.
You must have had a lot of pictures to choose from. Yeah. How did you decide which you chose to put in this amazing book?
It's very difficult, to be honest with you, very difficult. I tried to look at it make it look a little bit more interesting than just the front-on picture or the back of the guitar that you see in magazines. So I do a lot of close-ups. There's a lot of close-ups in the book. So I'll concentrate on the bridge area. So from a guitar nut point of view, you'll want to see what the nut slots are like for the strings sitting in the nut slots and the bridge and how it's set up. So I go for those things, keep it kind of detailed that way. But I've cut a lot of the text out, and it's more of a coffee table thing.
It sounds like it's a book that if you are a guitar nut and you know all the ins and outs of it, you'll be interested in. But for someone like myself who lives and breathes music but doesn't know the ins and outs of the guitar, like yourself, like a lot of people, it'll just be great to look at and remember them guitars, what people have used, and see what they are. And is that a fair comment?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You can just flip the pages. You don't have to get too bogged down and think, what's he talking about? Capacitors, what are those? You don't have to get lost with this. You can look at it and just admire it for, if you're a fan of some of these people. There should be somebody in this book, like there was in the first book, that you should find of interest. I mean, there's Michael Bruce from Alice Cooper Band, the School's Out guy. I got his guitar in there. Again, there's another George Harrison one, which he used in the Beatles in 1959 in Hamburg. That's such a cool guitar, to strip that down, pull that apart and see what makes that tick. So that's in there, and I'm keeping it just basically on what is the construction of this guitar without too much story.
A lot of these guitars that belong to these iconic and influential musicians, do you find that they still own them, or do you find that they're in the hands of other people now?
It's a bit of a mixed bag. Quite often they're trying to sell them on now, and there's more coming on that people want to sell. So some of these things have been sold before. I mean, the Eric Clapton one I went to look at earlier this year in New York, that was sold, I think, in 1999 to raise money for his Antigua drug rehabilitation thing. He sold a lot of guitars. So the gentleman who bought that in New York has had it ever since, and he's been playing it. And this year decided to cash in on it and sell it. So my job was to go over there, make sure, yes, that is that guitar, because you're talking a lot of money involved with it, and to make sure there's no issues with it. And there was just a couple of minor things. So, yeah, go and check it out, Steve.
It sounds great. The book came out on the 16th of August. It is available now. If people do want a copy, where's the best place to go for it?
If you just put Steve Clarke, Famous Frets, you'll see everything there. My, the website, everything, the publisher, Waterstones, Amazon, everything will come up. Social media, everything's there. Just put Steve Clarke, Famous Frets, and it'll be there.
You've done one book. You've released this one. It's called Volume 1, which leads to the next question. Can we expect a Volume 2?
Absolutely. It's halfway through, and there's some great ones in there. And I can tell you one for me personally, and I'm sure you, Dave, would identify with this. It's Ian Curtis, guitar, the Vox White Phantom.
Yeah, of course, such an iconic guitar.
Well, you look at that video, black and white, Love Will Tear Us Apart. That's the guitar that's going to be in.
I think even if you don't know your guitars and don't know anything about guitars, there's certain guitars that you know the pictures from.
It's an unusual shape straight away, but the video is so iconic. I got to look at that a couple of years back, which was just another pinch.
Who owns that now? Can you tell us?
No, I couldn't even if I knew.
Yeah.
But sometimes I get to know.
Yeah.
It's not always. I get to know sometimes if it's in this country or it's abroad. Same with Jeff Beck's. It's kind of public knowledge now, but that ended up in France. I think that's been sold on since.
Yeah. So I've got to ask the question, do you own any of these guitars yourself that, iconic? I wish.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, like Francis Rossi, two of his plectrums fell out of the guitar when I was taking the cover off to look at the pickups, and these two picks fell out, which you'd see him on lots of YouTube clips, stuffing them down the scratch plate, and two of them fell out, and I'm thinking, no, I can't have them. It's too many, risks.
A lot of temptation.
A lot of temptation. And you just can't do that. So you have to hand them back, and I say, oh, by the way, Francis, plectrums just fell out here, things like that. So, yeah. I found a few things like that. Labels have fallen out of cases. George Harrison, there was a label inside there, and it was his handwriting. Some of these things, when you're having a look in boxes, you'd be amazed what's still left in there.
I do love the fact of how much trust some of the biggest guitarists in the world put on you. It's absolute credit to yourself. Famous Frets Photos Volume 1 is out now. Just type in Steve Clarke, Famous Frets Photos, and you'll be able to find a link to buy that book. It does sound amazing. I've not seen it yet, but I can't wait to. So many iconic guitars in there. And watch this space for Volume 2. What does the future hold for Steve Clarke, as well as writing books?
More of the same, I think. Yeah, it's kicked in another level. I must be honest, this year. There are some really exciting guitars coming through. I say this Rory Gallagher collection now will be going on sale in October, and I'm going back in a week or so to fix his amplifiers, would you believe? Not his guitars, but to look at his amplifiers, so I have to get them sorted out.
So can we expect a famous amplifiers photos book at some point?
That's as interesting for people, really, but yeah, it will be mentioned. I mean, eventually I'll do a Rory Gallagher thing, probably his whole thing, the whole collection, because I've looked at 80 odd of his guitars, fixed about 20 odd for now. So when I go back, I've got to look at the amplifiers, but I'll probably just skate on them and just say, yeah, this was faulty and that needed looking at. So, but that'll be an awesome job.
I do love it, and sometimes as a music fan, I think the guitars are as iconic as the artists themselves.
You're right.
And
Absolutely.
you putting this book together, you've not just got the pictures off the internet and stuck a book together, you've got the experience with them, so it's the real thing. Steve Clarke's Famous Frets Photos Volume 1 is available now. Just search online, you will be able to find it. Steve, it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
And as a music fan, I do feel like I could talk to you for hours. Maybe there's a podcast in the making or something, I don't know, but it'd be really, really good to see you again and keep up to date with what you're doing.
Many thanks. Thanks, Dave. It's been a pleasure.